Get in the Ferrari, slide over here and show me things you would do for Versace. Girl, I wanna watch it. A house in the hills, you can tell your friends you're making it in Hollywood. You can tell. I'm Brian Hill, and once again we are talking about writing. This video is going to be a writer's commentary of Detective Comics number 983, the first issue of my 5-issue arc and the first time I've ever written Batman for DC Comics. The purpose of this video is to illustrate the choices I made, some of the strategies in terms of narrative structure, dialogue, in the hopes that if you're writing your own story, writing your own scripts, you'll find some things useful here, and if you're just interested in how the donuts are made from a writer's standpoint, you'll find it entertaining. So let's get into the book. So we start here with, it's not a 9-panel grid. You know, we've got 6 panels here, got sort of 8 panels with this design panel there. The purpose of this page is to settle the reader into the story. It's to give the reader a sense of the real world. It's a news broadcast. You know, we just have a young man in a human interest story talking to a pleasant but insincere newscaster. But there is one thing. We've got this voiceover from Batman here. You know, a little bat symbol here, you know, it's him speaking, you know. I became a nightmare, but that doesn't mean I don't have them. Sometimes you just want to give an extra hint of the tone of the story, right? Because we have conflicting tones here. This is a very pleasant tone. You know, it's just 2 people talking on TV. This is pretty foreboding. So anytime you can put more conflict on your page, even if it's tonal conflict, it's going to make it a little more interesting, hopefully. Now, this is a little wordy for me, but I was getting into the conversation of it all, and I kind of let it ride. I tend not to like my panels to have this many words in them. But thinking to Batman the Dark Knight Returns, to the way media was used in that, some of the work of Howard Chaykin, this isn't as satirical as Miller or Chaykin, but it's still got a bit of that satirical edge. And then we end here with this panel. The screen is breaking, right? Something is going wrong with the world. So while a story has 3 acts, or 5 acts, depending on how you get into it, and I'll do a video later about 5-act structure and 3-act structure, a comic book issue also has act structure. And even if you only have 20 pages, 22 pages, there is a bit of structure in that. So here we have the ordinary world of Gotham, you know, kind of Batman visually speaking over what's happening in Gotham if you want to get pretentious with the symbolism. But we end this page with this screen crack here, which again kind of reiterates something is going wrong with the world. Now, this is an important point. When you're getting to the end of your comic book page, you want to lead the reader to the next page. I don't like to resolve the end of a page completely, because then the beat stops. I like to leave a little bit of conflict in there somewhere, something that's going to make the reader say, well, I wonder what's going to happen next. So the last panel, and you'll see a lot of my last panels in this issue, kind of lead us to the next page. And then we get here with Duke, and Duke doing one of his patrols, you know, and he finds the guy in the chair. This is pretty standard, you know, kind of action thriller comics stuff. I'm not reinventing the wheel. In fact, I'm not really reinventing much in the issue at all. Part of that is I wanted it to be a dependable experience. I didn't want to come in too crazy and do too many wild things with the format. So, you know, I have panel counts that are average and sort of structure that's average. And that's all by intention, because I wanted to make sure that following James Tynion, I was able to create a dependable experience. And then, once again, we introduce the villain, and we've got the panel here that sets up the conflict for the next page. Now, let's stop for a second and talk about character introduction. So Duke is a hero, so he's going to get kind of a heroic introduction here. You know, again, kind of standard stuff. He's doing something cool, and I love the coloring effect that implies motion. But the villain is introduced here, and I deliberately don't give you a great image of the villain, because I'm trying to build mystery in the reader. You know, you only have one chance to reveal your villain in a fulsome way to the reader, and I don't want to waste it in little panels, so we want to put him in the shadows. You know, and we want to kind of highlight the light coming from the mask. These are all little details that the reader can pick up. And then we get the click of the button, and then we get the explosion. You know, nice big explosion here, and consequence. So here's another thing to keep in mind. You know, the way that you articulate action and violence. If you look at these 2 pages, this isn't really action. This is violence. This has a lot of consequence. And that's something that matters very much to me, because I don't like reckless violence that doesn't have any meaning, that doesn't have any weight. You know, we've got characters that are deliberately risking their lives to protect innocent people. That should come with a measure of risk that the reader can emotionally absorb and understand. So I'm not going to give you flippant patter while people are fighting. That's generally not my way. I think that violence is scary. I've been through some pretty stark violence in my life. I depict it in my comics, but I don't like to make it light. I don't like to make it fun, because I don't think it is. It can be righteous. It can satisfy us. We can want to see these battles happen. But I think there has to be something about it that's a little horrifying, like a little touch of horror. And that comes from the physical consequence of what you see. It's the explosion, Crunch crashes into the car, and then we've got lacerations. We've got Alfred pulling out a device from one of Duke's wounds. The implication being that Karma inserted something into Duke, right? Kind of a horrifying thing. Using the reader's imagination to make the experience of it a little better. And then we've got this really interesting 9-panel grid. Now, I didn't indicate that it should be, chopped up with the blood stripes. That was something Miguel did, and I think it's fairly effective. In terms of introductions, we're now introducing Alfred into the story. And we're introducing Alfred in an active medical role. We're showing his part of the unit that is the Bat family. He's not just showing up and saying a pithy line, he's showing up doing something. And that's an important point as well. Introduce your characters in the act of doing, even if they're established characters, because the reader will appreciate what their function is in the narrative. So, Duke's sitting there, Alfred's tending to him, and then we're doing the old Brian Hill trick where I'm not giving you everything on this page, making you go to the next one. We just get a line from Batman in the glove. "I'm sorry, Duke. He's gone. Steady, son. You're going to be all right." Right? So that's the introduction of Batman. And here we are in the splash and the credits here. Going on, we've got Bruce Wayne. So I wanted to use Bruce in the story as a character, not just an afterthought, but to show the difference between Bruce and Batman. Bruce being in the day, Batman being in the night, but kind of also Bruce in his own environment, Bruce in the, in front of his castle, that kind of thing. And then we've got Martian Manhunter. So originally I thought about putting Superman here, but Superman was so busy doing things in Brian Bendis's work that it made more sense for me to go ahead and put Martian Manhunter here instead. And we've got this conversation between John Johns and Bruce Wayne. Bruce is deliberately kind of keeping things close to the vest. He's not sharing details, but you see the intention between the two characters. Bruce would like to get back to what he was doing. Martian Manhunter would like to know more about what Bruce is doing. So we've got a character that wants something and a character that wants to withhold. And that's all you need in a dramatic scene, is one character wants something, another character doesn't want to give it to them. Then you've got your scene. So here we go. This is a bit more like the way I'm most comfortable doing dialogue. I try to subscribe to the Frank Miller rule of one panel, one moment in time. An artist can't draw multiple moments in time within one panel, so I don't like to have too much dialogue happening inside of a panel, because each line has to match with one expression. I try as hard as I can to not have too many words there so that you can really feel like that's what Martian Manhunter felt like when he said that line. And it also helps move the reader, I think, through the scene. And then we've got 2 panels here where I use silence. I think silence is a very effective technique when you're writing comics. You don't have to crowd every panel with dialogue. Trust your artist to be able to carry those moments emotionally. Let those moments exist as emotional moments and not intellectual moments, i.e., moments where we're reading dialogue and interpreting dialogue. So here we've got Bruce, looking in on Duke, and he's concerned. He's speaking with Alfred. He's doing his detective thing, and then I'm echoing the line that Karma said before. Right? Bruce, he said, "We make you weaker." Karma said that before, and now we're sort of building the villain piece by piece, step by step, information, information detail by information detail, so the reader can start to form their ideas about who and what, this man in the mask is. Then we cut to Metropolis. So this is a pretty big cut, right? We're going from a very quiet moment, a solemn moment, a pensive moment, where Bruce is considering the words from Karma. I'm not resolving the conflict. Remember what I said before, don't resolve the conflict at the end of the page. And then we're going to Metropolis, to this crazed gunman holding this innocent hostage there, and we see Jefferson pierce Black Lightning. Again, introducing a character in an act of doing, demonstrating who they are by the actions they take. And I'm cross-cutting this with a scene of Jefferson speaking with this incoming teacher. And this was actually a note that I got from Chris Conroy, the editor, and I think it was a great note. Originally, these 2 scenes, the teacher scene and the take out the gunman scene, they happened separately. They happened back to back, but they weren't laid on top of each other. Chris had a great idea about shuffling the cards, and I think that works because we're contrasting not only the active moment with the more quiet moment, but we have the opportunity to look at Jefferson's dialogue here and read that in the context of what he's doing as Black Lightning. So the images and the words are serving multiple purposes. And that's another thing that you want to try to do in your work, is have the images and the words serve multiple purposes, have double meanings behind things, visual symbolism. You want to layer things so that there's more there for the reader to swim around in. So we go through these 2 pages here, and we start the action that Black Lightning causes on this page, so there's a page turn. Then the reaction, he's trapping the guy in the electromagnetic shield and goes off. Keep your eyes closed, Angel. And then he's talking to the guy, so he's resolved this bit, and he's resolved whether or not he's going to hire this teacher. It's all sort of happening simultaneously, right? We have a double resolution that leads us to this panel here that shows, again, the emotional consequence of what we just saw before. This wasn't an easy thing for Jefferson to do, wasn't an easy thing for this young woman to go through. We want to see that consequence played out in the drama. We don't just want to have the hero, punch a guy across the face and say something cool and point to the reader and that's it. No, we want to have the emotional fallout of what happens. It gives a little weight and a little gravity, hopefully, to the events that have gone before. And even though this is the end of the scene, we're not fully resolving the conflict. Everything is safe here, but everything might not be okay. And again, don't resolve all the stuff at the end of the page. Well, I shouldn't say that, but if you don't, it might help the reader move through the book. You can do whatever you want. There's no hard and fast rules, but I don't like to resolve everything at the end of the page. So now we've got this 9-panel grid. Now this is deliberate structuring because we've had, different panel layouts here. We've had splash pages. We've had cool kind of impressionistic grids, and I wanted to get back to the discipline and the control of a 9-panel grid. It's almost like a book reset in a way. It lets us kind of recharge our emotion. And this is just a scene about the mother of the young man, Darren Griffith, that died in the beginning of the book. Again, more emotional consequence, kind of setting not only the physical stakes for the issue, but the emotional stakes as well. And we're going back into this kind of karma gets the last panel grammar that we've established. And the kind of grammar that we're working with here is just a matter of repetition, sort of repeating a technique so the reader starts to understand the meaning of that technique. And that's where you develop a kind of an, inter-issue grammar, a conversation between you and the reader, so that the reader now starts to read these last panels as these are the karma panels. Moving on. Then back to Jefferson in Metropolis. Now, I moved him into Metropolis. I know Cleveland has been part of his backstory, but it was just more interesting if he was in Metropolis for me, and I think there's some establishment of him being in Metropolis in earlier work post-Rebirth, and I thought that was kind of cool. So we're going with another, kind of triplet of silent panels here. And you get the feeling of it, the feeling of a person coming home. And it feels private as well, because we're about to interrupt that privacy with the coming of Batman. And Batman shows up. Notice how he's rendered here, and this was all indicated in the script. I wanted Batman to not be so familiar to the world, to the characters. I wanted him to be mysterious. I wanted to evoke some of that Dark Knight feeling about Batman and not always light him completely and let him kind of step out of the shadows and wonder how he got into the room and how long he's been standing there and all of those Batman-y things. And so, Batman says, Jefferson, you've got to come to me. We're going to go to Gotham. I've got things for you to do. We're using dialogue here. Bruce Wayne owes me a favor. So that tells the reader that Jefferson doesn't know that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Without having a line where Jefferson's like, I don't even know who you are. Instead, we just kind of imply it here. And by implication, we understand that Jefferson doesn't know Batman's identity. So we've established the details of their relationship. They know each other. They don't know each other that well. And Batman knows Jefferson Pierce's identity. So we have a power differential in their dynamic. Batman knows more about Jefferson Pierce than Jefferson Pierce knows about Batman. And that's what we're establishing here. And they continue to have the conversation, and then I pull the Batman the Animated Series trick, where Batman, you have a conversation with him, you turn around to talk to him, and then you turn over here, and Batman is gone. Jefferson says, right, because he knows that's what Batman does. Again, there's a little bit of history between these guys. They don't know each other really well, but Jefferson knows Batman well enough to know Batman's ways. And then, it's like, 6 hours until then that flight leaves. I don't want to go, but damn it. And we know what Jefferson's choice is going to be. So here's another little tidbit. We don't have to fully tell the reader what the choice of a character is going to be. A reader can infer that from a character's actions, from a character's demeanor. Most of the time in life, we don't openly say, I've made the choice to do X. We make the choice, and then we either judge ourselves for it or praise ourselves for it, and then we set out to do whatever we chose to do. So instead of having Jefferson agree to Batman in the scene, which would kind of resolve the entire discussion, kind of let it hang, let Jefferson come to his own conclusion, and it's a private moment, really, between him and the reader, but we know what he's going to do. And going back to Gotham City, a little iconicism here. I'm a big fan of iconic imagery, and there's nothing more iconic than a bat signal shining over Gotham City with a location tag. That tells you exactly what universe you're in. And we're coming into the action. So we're coming in pretty late into this. Mainly because, one, these guys don't matter that much. What matters is Batman's going to listen to Karma speaking over this action. So we have something that's, again, deliberately iconic. Bank robbers, police sirens, explosions, cash swirling around in the car, and Batman's going to go stop it. We've seen this done before, but I wanted to layer Karma's dialogue over it, but not have the reader confused. So because most people kind of automatically can read these images as Batman stopping the robbers from doing the thing, I can layer Karma's dialogue on top of it and not confuse anybody, not be too fancy, so people didn't have any idea what was going on. It's almost like this stuff is happening, the images are happening in the subconscious mind, while the conscious mind is focusing on what Karma is saying. And what Karma is saying is in direct opposition to what's happening in the image, right? That's juxtaposition, which is another important tool if you're writing a comic book. Now you're a novelty, a brand that you share with unworthy children. Why do you even wear that costume? No one is afraid of you. I apologize for my dog. My dog is barking. So Karma's saying, well, you're not scary, Batman. You're like a novelty. You're like a Bigfoot or something, or even less than that. You're a mascot, right? He's using this verbiage, but Batman's obviously, imposing and striking a classic Batman pose. So we do have this juxtaposition here. There is a discussion between Karma's captions and the image of Batman himself, and again, that creates conflict. Tonal conflict, philosophical conflict. It adds a layer to what's happening. And then, the car crashes into the post and the guy flies out. So when I write action, I'm pretty detailed about it. And that comes from my screenwriting TV background, I suppose. I do like to indicate, well, this is what happens in this panel, this is what happens in that panel. And again, thinking about the physics and the physical consequence of the violence. And what would really happen. If the car stopped suddenly and there was no seatbelt, somebody might fly through a window, and we will just assume that these two people aren't dead because Batman never kills. I think they're just gravely injured. That's the official word from the Hill administration. So Karma continues here. He's kind of just laying into Batman with some more talking, and we end with the kind of the demonstration of what Karma's saying. These people aren't scared of you. They're just snapping your photograph with their cell phones. You are kind of a novelty. And you can kind of look and see, right, the mirroring. You've got this here and that there. So we see the kind of the game of opposites that's being played by these images. And then we go into the final two pages of the issue, where we introduce Cassandra Cain. Now, we don't see Cassandra Cain here really doing anything particularly physical, but the first line she says is, Duke Hurt wants to see him to help. So we know that she would like to assist in what's happening in Gotham, at the moment. And little things like this, I put this in the script, Alfred and the painting of the Wayne family. We want to keep that weight in the narrative. We want to use the environment to tell more story if we can. It's nothing that Alfred needs to regard in dialogue, but we can see it here, and it reminds us of the tragedy that gave birth to Batman. And then we have these quick little panels here that lead to the large page here. Now here I had to make a choice. I had run out of pages, so I needed to make a deliberate choice between, do I not get this page and end with the explosion and reveal Karma in the next issue, or do I have a small explosion here, a little bit of onomatopoeia, and then reveal Karma at the end of the book? And the best decision was to reveal the villain at the end of the book. I didn't want to make the reader wait, for the next issue before they got a good look at the bad guy. So I decided I had to put this explosion down here at this page because I wanted to break up these moments into little beats. Beat, 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 boom. And then here we go. And we have our villain here physically over the hero. The hero getting ready to go into a thing, go into battle, right? Mythological stuff. And we yet again reiterate this line, but you're making him weaker, which is the third time you've heard that phrase over the course of the issue. For some reason, threes work really well. If you want the reader to remember something, do it 3 times. It's like a mystical number or something, a trinity, as it were. So having that kind of repetition in triplet can really kind of drill in a point that you want to make to the reader. And now we've established this is the guy that Batman's going to fight. This is the man that harmed Duke. This is the man that's about to harm Cassandra Cain. This is the man that has, already left that cryptic and grave message for Batman. on the little drive that he was listening to while he was taking out the armed thugs. And we're setting the stage for the next issue. So it's really just hype, most of it. I mean, most of this issue is setting the stage, which is the job of the first act of a story. You know, the issue is supposed to set the stage for what is to come, introduce the characters, and get the reader primed to receive the rest of the story. And that's what you really have in a 5-issue arc. Every issue is just about an act. If you're using 5-act Elizabethan structure and you have 5 issues, then every issue is an act. So at the end of this issue, we get to the end of the first act, and the second act will start with the next issue, 984. And that is, pretty much it. That is kind of the thought process that I went through, I should say, as I was writing the book. Brevity of dialogue. Don't let the reader resolve the emotions at the end of a page so they turn to the next page. Introduce your characters effectively in action so we can see them doing, their character, acting out their character, rather than just showing up in a dialogue moment, keeping consequence in the story, violence mixed in with the action to give it weight and heft, and kind of balancing out the emotional push and pull of the experience. Making sure the reader gets a good range of experiences through the issue, so it's not just all quiet or all action, but there's a mix between the two. And that just the moment when they would get tired of one, you kind of give them the other and bounce them back and forth, and hopefully you propel them through the issue itself. Well, that is pretty much all I have to say off the top of my head. If you have any questions, feel free to find me on Twitter at Brian Edward Hill. I believe the next video I'm going to talk about is going to be about story structure. I'm going to discuss 5-act Elizabethan story structure and 3-act story structure and how they are both the same thing. Until then, keep working, keep writing, and take care.